Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome to Christian Motherhood Unfiltered. My name is Emma, and it's a beautiful day to be alive. Am I right? Happy October. It's the first episode of a new month, which means it's a Q&A episode. If you're new around here, on the first episode of a month, I do a little Q&A, and I kind of change the topic just to keep it fresh, but that way my content stays very you focused and very helpful. And I don't know, I just think it's very nice to kind of touch base with y'all, and I like you guys to be involved. So if you don't follow me on my other social media accounts, make sure you go do that so you can be a part of these episodes every month. The other day I was around this friend of mine who is a newer mom. I don't remember how old her baby is, but she just had her first child this year, and we were at something together and her baby was just being a baby. I just saw this look in her eyes when I watched her get up for like the 10th time to go help her baby or whatever. And I just saw this look in her eyes that I felt so deeply. And you could just tell by the look on her face that she was in the thick of it. Like she was in the trenches and she was exhausted and overwhelmed. And I just felt for her so deeply in that moment, because just like having the perspective, like as the outside looking in, as somebody that's already gone through something, and you see someone else in the thick of it, and you can just read their expression and their emotions, and you feel how they feel because you've been there. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I just wanted to give her a hug and tell her so many things. And a lot of the times you just kind of have to figure it out. But I do feel like this episode, I hope, can be just a little bit of encouragement and advice for somebody that's in the thick of it in motherhood, whether you just had a baby and you're very freshly postpartum, or you're a first-time mom and you are just still figuring it out and you don't know what you're doing and you just feel like you need somebody to encourage you, or maybe you are pregnant and you're feeling very overwhelmed and anxious and you just need somebody to just talk you through everything that you're about to experience. That is what I hope to deliver for you in this episode, just to be a friend. If you came to me, I have 2 kids. I'm not a pro, obviously. Hello. I think that's the great thing though about just life in general. I talked about this in my marriage podcast episode last week, but I think about this in motherhood too. Like there are no pros at being a mom. I think that there are moms that have more experience than others, of course, but for the most part, like motherhood is ever changing, it's ever evolving, and there is no finish line. And yes, I might have more children that are a little bit older, but like there are always people that know more than me and know less than me. Anyways, I'm on a tangent already. I'm also a little distracted because right outside my window, as soon as I started recording, my neighbor started like tearing up his whole grass, and it's so loud, and I'm just like trying not to be distracted watching that happen right now. So if you can hear that in the background, my apologies, but this is literally the only time I have to film this, so it was really kind of him to do his grass right now. Anyways, this episode today is for the mom in the trenches, so hopefully I can answer some questions that are helpful to you. I'm just going to jump right in because that's what we're here for. I want to get y'all's input and not waste any more time yapping your ear off. So let's jump into the questions. Okay, I tried to kind of lump the questions together. That way, if you are in a specific stage and you don't care to listen to the other stages, you can kind of skip around. But I'm going to start with the people who are pregnant for the first time and like getting ready to have their first baby, the questions that they asked. That way, if you are past that stage and you don't want to hear it, you can kind of skip. I will timestamp this episode. So the first question is labor scary? And I think every pregnant mom ever obviously has thought this question, and it's one of the most just overwhelming things to prepare for because you have no idea what to prepare for. And I think there's a lot of tendency to like go online and search out other people's experiences and opinions because you've never done this, and there are millions of people in the world that have. But I just want to caution you to try not to overconsume labor stories and birth stories. There are an ample amount of women who are eager to share them with you, but yours is going to be completely different than theirs. I remember back in the day, I used to be obsessed with watching wedding videos back before I was even like engaged. That was like my Roman Empire. I loved watching people's wedding videos. And then I got married and that was a little bit stressful for me to watch. And so I started watching birth vlogs and I was obsessed with watching birth vlogs before I was, well, before I was pregnant. But then when I got pregnant, I had to stop watching birth vlogs because it actually caused me severe anxiety because it was a little bit too real and raw, like a little too close to home. And I'm really grateful I did that. And I still feel like I kind of overconsumed and tried to read blogs and get people's advice about birth. And obviously, it's great to be prepared, but you also have to go into it with just an open hand policy. Like, I don't know what to expect, but I'm surrendering this to the Lord. I think it's a great idea to pray over your birth and to just ask the Lord for peace about it. But I don't think it's a good idea to overconsume a bunch of vlogs and a bunch of people's opinions and experiences because that's just going to overwhelm you. And again, your experience is going to be very different than everybody else's, which I know is not helpful to hear because you want to prepare, you want to control everything you can. But I think the best thing you could ever do is just prepare your heart with the Lord first and trust that He's going to take care of it. That is the biggest thing I learned from my first daughter's birth and my second daughter's birth. And they were very different, but the second time around, because I had such a traumatic first birth, I really could have let that just send me into a deep spiral about my second birth. But I really leaned on the Lord for that experience and really trusted that like He would redeem it. And I spent my whole pregnancy preparing my heart instead of preparing my mind and my knowledge and filling up myself with all of this insight and advice and knowledge. Instead, I spent all that time and energy really leaning on the Lord and really refining my heart to trust Him. That way, when I got to my birth, I knew that whatever was thrown at me, I could handle it because I had trained my heart, if that makes sense, to trust the Lord in all circumstances. And that was the best thing I could have ever done. And it was such a beautiful, peaceful birth experience. And man, the Lord showed me so much favor in it. But I also think part of it was like my heart posture towards it. And I didn't go into it panicking and freaking out. I went into it completely surrendered and trusting that the Lord had me and had my child. And that was all that I needed to do. And He would take care of the details. And so that is my biggest encouragement to you around labor. I know that it is scary, but God's got it. He's already has it written. And I would just encourage you to just pray over it. Advice for the first few nights with your baby. So the newborn bubble is truly unlike anything I have ever experienced. It's the highest highs and the lowest lows. And I don't know that I even really have any tips other than kind of what I just said, fully surrender to it. Again, the first time around, I feel like I was trying to like rush back to normal, even though I was going through the most traumatic experience of my life. And I didn't know. The second time around, I was very slow to do anything. I really just took it easy and I just milked that newborn bubble as much as possible. I asked for help from as many people as possible. I tried to just sit and lay around with my baby and sleep whenever I could during the day and just really soak it in. And I would especially encourage you, if this is your first baby, I know that everyone says sleep when the baby sleeps and your mind can't stop because you're like, no, I have too much to do. When do I get anything done? Please sleep when the baby sleeps, because when you have more than one child, that is no longer an option. And I wish that with my first child, I would have slept when she did. I rarely did because I wanted to get things done and I wanted to get back to normal and I wanted to have me time, which is all fine. But also, you just had a baby. Let yourself have some room to breathe, give yourself grace to heal, and just relax, just rest, and know that like those first few nights and weeks and even months is kind of just survival and it's figuring things out. And you're probably not going to have a great routine, which is really hard for a lot of people, myself included. I knew that going into it the second time around, and I still kind of struggled because it is hard to just have this life and these routines. And especially if you are a person that thrives on that routine, to have that completely thrown out the window for who knows how long, and everything is suddenly out of your control and nothing is normal and in a normal routine, that's hard. Okay, it is, but it's very temporary, whether it's a few weeks or a few months or even a year. Like, it will pass and you will look back like I am now at 18 months and postpartum and going like, wow, that feels like an eternity ago. And you'll get there, but enjoy it and just like fully surrender to it while you're in it, because it will be so much easier if you just surrender to that season than if you are fighting the current and trying to rush back to normal and find a strict routine right away. If you just surrender to that stage, I promise you will enjoy it more and you will be so much more present because you won't be stressed about things that you can't even control anyway. I got a couple questions about breastfeeding tips, and I'm hesitant to talk about this because, again, everyone's experience is very different. My 2 children even were so vastly different. It's insane. And I don't feel like I'm very well qualified to give advice because my experiences were so different. My first daughter was, I'm pretty confident she still has a lip tie, and no one could really confirm that. And feeding was so hard that I think I lasted like a week or 2 with just like straight up nursing her, but I started pumping pretty quickly because she would not nurse well. And then I exclusively pumped for like 6 weeks. That's all that I made it. And then I was like, forget this. I hate exclusively pumping. And I gave her formula like super early. And with my second, I was able to exclusively breastfeed her until she was 6 months old. So like very night and day experiences. And I guess I say that to say like, whatever happens, I want you to know that it is not something that you are doing wrong. And again, that's something that I tried to front load and prepare and take in all this knowledge for. And I think that to some extent, it's good to know some resources you can go to if you have specific questions. But when you overload yourself with all of this information, it's just overwhelming. And it's a lot of it is just dependent upon like the child that you get and the circumstances. And like every baby is different. And I do think there are some things you can probably do to make it easier. But like with my first daughter, I think there was just a lot of things that were not lined up in our favor. And nothing that I did or didn't do would have changed that. And I know that now. But in the moment, I felt crippling guilt about it, like I did something wrong or I wasn't prepared enough or I didn't try hard enough. And I know that I did. So I would just encourage you to let that guilt go if that's something that you are already anxious for, or you're in the thick of it and it's just not working, but you are trying as hard as you can and you're really struggling. When I officially like gave that up with my first daughter, I felt great. Like I felt guilt, but I also felt so much better because I was so much less stressed. It just worked so much better for her. And I didn't have that with Hallie, my second. It was fine the whole time. Like it did not cause me the same level of stress at all. So again, every kid is different, and don't take it so personally. Like I'm failing my kid. As long as your kid is fed, it doesn't matter. Okay. So take that pressure off of yourself that the whole world is on your shoulders, because it's not. And I will also, speaking of like resources and accounts and things, I'll link some down below that were really helpful for me for breastfeeding tips and like sleep advice and newborn stuff. I definitely had a couple of accounts that like I trusted and I would go to if I had a specific question in mind. I would go to their account and see if they had something that answered that question. I would recommend that instead of like front loading as much as you possibly can, because that's just going to overwhelm you and you're probably not going to remember any of it anyway in the moment. So go to specific accounts that you've learned like you can trust and you really like their advice and respect their opinion, and search for that question on their account. So I will link the accounts that I really enjoyed down below that were super helpful for me in that season. Okay, another kind of taboo topic, but something that's a little bit stressful, but not a little bit. It's very stressful for moms in all stages of motherhood, is sleep. And again, I link some accounts down below that I really enjoyed following for sleep, but this is the taboo topic because everybody kind of does things differently. And I personally used taking care of babies with both my kids, and they are still great sleepers, and I will do it for all my future kids. And that's okay if you don't agree. But I just really liked her approach to things. I took her, I can't even remember what it's called. You can do it at like 4 months, I think, the sleep training technically. And I started that, I think at like 5 or 6 months with both of my girls. I know that that is not everybody's cup of tea. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But up until that 5 or 6 month mark, I kind of just sucked it up, honestly. Like it's not fun. Like it's hard when they are so little and they just cannot put themselves to sleep. But I think, again, the second time around, I gained a lot of perspective knowing that it does end eventually. It is challenging in the moment, but you just kind of have to survive and do whatever you need to survive. And sometimes that meant rocking my baby a lot. And wearing my baby for a lot of her naps and spending a lot of nights just like constantly consoling my babies. And I think, again, just like, don't watch a million people's experiences and then set that expectation for yourself, because that's where you're going to set yourself up for failure, because your kid is different than everyone else's kids, and that is just reality. And sleep is hard, but sleep is going to be different for every single kid. But I know that this is taboo, but I really do think there are certain things you can do to help your baby sleep pretty early on. I did not sleep train until they were, again, 5 or 6 months old. But in those first like 6 months of life, there are certain like loose schedules and wake windows and things that I followed that I found very helpful, not to do very strictly and like be super controlling about, but it's helpful to have a guideline so you know, like, okay, they're crying right now because they are exhausted and they need to go to sleep. Like, that's all that it is. And I think sometimes there's a lot of negative connotation around wake windows and schedules and things when babies are really little. And I just don't agree. Like, I found that very helpful for my newborn, not my newborn really, but like once they were a couple months old, they were on a pretty consistent schedule without me even having to try, just because their bodies naturally got tired at the same kind of time every day. Their wake windows are pretty predictable. So again, I'll link all those accounts down below, that if you have specific sleep questions, definitely check those out. But every baby is different. Every kid's sleep patterns are different. And that doesn't mean that you're doing something right or wrong. It means you have a child, not a robot. Okay. Those are all the questions about like the first raw months of newborn life and birth and all of that. Now I want to kind of talk about all of the months after and kind of what goes on in a mom's heart and with identity and things like that. So the first question is, how long until you started to feel like yourself again? I think once my babies both times started like sleeping through the night, being on a pretty predictable routine, that's when I felt like I could come up for air a little bit, because things were a little bit more predictable and I could gain my footing back a little. So it was about the 6-month mark, I feel like, both times, because that's about when I sleep trained and everything started to kind of get on more of a routine and I was getting better sleep. And that is just when I found both times to kind of be okay, I'm not in the trenches as much. Like, yes, it's still hard. The whole first year for me, both times, was very hard. But I think something about the 6-month mark, like your baby starts really reacting to you and smiling and playing and cooing at you a little bit, and they have a little bit more personality. And so you're not just like consoling a crying baby all the time. You have like a little pal to like laugh at and snuggle with, and it's so fun. So that's really helpful. But also I think you're far enough out at 6 months that you can kind of start to slowly feel like yourself again, which it's going to be different for everybody. I think everybody probably has a different number, but I think why it was 6 months for me, like I said, was just because that's when I sleep trained and my babies were sleeping through the night, and sleep does a number for your mental health. I'm nervous about not getting my quiet time and missing my me time. This is one of the hardest things I struggled with in those first months, with not having like an overlapping nap schedule or a routine. And then once my second child was on a nap schedule, there was a good period of time where like she would nap at 10 and then she'd wake up, and then my oldest would go to nap at 1 and then my youngest would nap at like 3. And so it was like they were opposite schedules and I did not have any breaks where they would overlap, and that was so hard. And eventually I learned to kind of like shift my oldest nap and my youngest nap a little bit so that I could get a break. But there were several months where like I would go the whole day and did not get a minute without being with a child, and that was so challenging and I was not prepared for that. And I don't think I realized like how much I needed that time during the day to be a person by myself and like get things done and just breathe on my own. I didn't really fully realize the importance of that until it was taken from me. But again, it is temporary. Yes, that is definitely hard. And also with like quiet time with the Lord, my quiet time was not great for several months because I wasn't sleeping. I was not waking up before my babies. My baby was sleeping in a bassinet next to me. So I was not getting up at 5 a.m. Like, I was just trying to survive. That is okay. You're not going to have this perfect, beautiful, structured me time and quiet time routine at every season of your life. I think that I know that God cares more about me meeting with you in the moments of your day, regardless of like what your mornings look like or what your Bible time looks like. Pull out your Bible and read it while you're nursing your baby, or just little swaps like listening to worship music instead of a podcast, or just making time for the Lord in your day is the most important thing you could ever do, as opposed to like freaking out because your quiet time doesn't look like it used to and you didn't wake up before your kids. Don't let the enemy guilt you, and also don't let him constrict you to feel like it's one way and one size fits all, because that is not the Lord, and that is not his heart for how he wants to meet with you every day. Okay, how does your marriage dynamic shift? I talked about marriage in my podcast episode last week, and I definitely touched a little bit on kids and how having kids really changes your marriage. Maybe you did not experience this, but I absolutely did, especially the first time around. And I also gave you guys a book recommendation. So go back to that episode, and the book is linked in the show notes if you just want to like skip and get the book, get the book. But we did a book after we had our second daughter, and it was like a challenge, and it was so helpful for our marriage, because it is hard, because your role as a mom and his role as a dad, they're just different. And there are certain things that the dads can help you with that you need to communicate, and you need to have a dad that helps. But also there are certain things that you just have to do. And especially if you are home all day and you stay home and he works full time, like that's just different. And it is hard because you start to kind of keep score. And again, I don't want to talk too much about this because I really unpacked marriage last week, and I would encourage you, if you didn't listen to it, to go listen to that episode, whether you're having kids or not. But you're probably listening to this because you're in the thick of it, and I think that that episode would be very helpful in this season. But yeah, just don't start to keep score. Don't start to keep tallies on who's doing what and how much was I up last night while he kept sleeping, and don't do that. I'm also in the middle of a parenting class at my church right now, and they were talking a couple weeks ago about having a child-centered home versus like a marriage parent-centered home, and how important it is to make sure that your marriage is the most important thing in your house, and like really prioritizing and valuing your time together and your relationship together, because that will overflow into your parenting and into your children's lives and their security. And I think that is so true and so important, that you can allow your kids to just consume your life. And when you're in the thick of it, like they kind of do, because they are just a big responsibility. Like they take up a lot of time, as they should. But in your marriage, like you have to prioritize each other and make sure you're still talking to each other and communicating and having date nights and like spending good quality time together and having a good, healthy relationship, not just ships passing in the night, me getting bitter and mad because he's still sleeping while I'm currently breastfeeding the baby at 1 a.m. and he's snoring and I'm mad. Like, those are just little bricks that you will start to put up to form a wall between you and your husband, and that harms you both, as well as harms your children. So I, again, would encourage you to go listen to that episode, but it takes effort. But yes, it is hard with little kids, and don't let anyone tell you that it's not, because it is. It's not impossible to have a healthy, good marriage with young kids. It just takes a little bit more effort because you're in a new season of life, and that's okay. I'm in the thick of it right now, and I went from having 4 to 5 kids to never imagining how I could do this again. Does that feeling ever change? I felt that way with my first, especially because it was such a hard transition. I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I cannot imagine ever wanting to have another kid. Like, I don't want to have an only child, but like I don't know how I'm going to do this again, and I will be lucky if we have 2 kids, and I always wanted 3 or 4, and I remember feeling that way exactly because it's so much. But obviously that feeling went away because I had another kid. And I will say too, with my second daughter, because my experience with her birth was so different, and because I was just more of a seasoned mom and I kind of knew what to expect, I was more confident, I was more happy, I was ready for another, like, immediately. I was like, this is so great, and I love having kids, and like I had such a different experience. So you may change your mind, but also don't let that stress you out, because you don't have to have a baby today. Like, you have to give yourself time to adjust, and that includes your expectations and your future planning. Like, you don't have to have it all figured out. You may change your mind, but you will probably come back to, you somehow magically forget like all the hard that you went through with babies. It's crazy. I really truly think it's something that the Lord designed in us, to like forget how hard birth is and pregnancy and everything, because we want it all the time. Like, we have baby fever like crazy, regardless of how difficult it was. And I just think that's the Lord's favor, because we were created to just like be fruitful and multiply. And I think that is really cool, how we just get amnesia on like childbirth and postpartum and sleepless nights. Like, you kind of forget how hard it all is, because you were designed to do it again. I don't know. It's crazy. So yes, you probably will forget a little bit, and it will be less raw, I guess. And once it's less raw, you will probably go back to wanting a lot of children, but you may not, and that's okay too. You don't have to have it all planned out today. I feel like I could talk for a very long time about this, but I think that's all the questions I'm going to get to today. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope that this was encouraging. And again, if you are just about to go through your first birth experience, or you're currently in the thick of it, I just want to encourage you that this is not forever, and you do not need to rush to get out of this season. If you would just let go and surrender, and just really ask the Lord, what are you teaching me in this season, and what beauty can I find within this season? It will be so much easier. When you're swimming against the current, it's hard, because you're swimming against the current. Like, you're swimming upstream, you're climbing an uphill battle. But if you just like let go, and you release control, and you surrender exactly where the Lord has you, and you just be faithful in your everyday moments, whether it's sleepless nights or breastfeeding or whatever you're like really struggling with, I would challenge you to just surrender it to the Lord and use that as an opportunity for growth and refinement. And He will meet you where you are, and He will strengthen you. And then one day you'll look back and you'll go, wow, I really did that. I am so strong. Every day gives you more character, and it gives you more growth. It makes you stronger. Being a mom showed me just how strong I really am. And especially in those moments, freshly postpartum, like, that really tested me more than anything else in my life. But it's also showed me how strong I am, because you had to be, right? So be encouraged that the season that you're in, it's not a waste, but it's also like really truly growing you and growing character and making you stronger and making you a better mom. And it's all for your good and His glory. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I hope that you feel encouraged. If you made it all the way to the end, leave me a comment on YouTube or Spotify and let me know what stage you are in. If you are pregnant, how far along are you? Or if you just gave birth, or if you're a couple years in and you just still feel like you're in the trenches. You know what, girl? Me too sometimes. Like, it's fine. Don't forget to give me a rating and a review wherever you are listening. It is so very helpful for my podcast. And follow me over on YouTube if you are not already watching on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram. It's at EmmaGraceJens. And thanks for being here. I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye, friends.